Hello, Internet. It's Gino, that Pinguino Grieco, here again with another episode of Deep Listens, and today it is time. We have teased this episode for many a week, and it is finally time to discuss the Final Fantasy trading card game. Surprise Final Fantasy content, which means I'm joined, as always, by the co-conductor of the Final Fantasy Pain Train, never-ending torment. Chris, ZompiePie Redacted.
Who's going in the torture chamber? Who's going in? Who forgot to meet their deadline on their podcast progress to where we had to do some sort of BS makeshift episode for this week? Who forgot to do their homework? Who's playing Sakura Clicker with me?
No one forgot to do their homework. The community endurance run is coming up. I knew that this was something that people have been wanting for a while. And I thought that it was a good time for it. We had an appropriate time.
No. So you're going to be playing another torture chamber with me.
I'm going to be playing a torture chamber for the Giant Bomb Community Endurance Run, which, if people remember, is happening April 20th through 22nd. We will be playing a bunch of video games on GiantBomb.com and ExplosiveRuns.com to raise money for Pencils of Promise, a charity that builds schools, trains teachers, and sends kids to school in developing nations. If you've been following our escapades with the Final Fantasy, all of our various Final Fantasy podcasts, you and I will be playing Final Fantasy 13
but there's an
Saturday
update
the 21st.
In terms of our donation incentives.
Yes, there
is. Do we want to talk about that? Do we want to spend some time talking about our horrible idea that just got worse?
Yeah, let's do that real quick. So Friday, I'm going to be doing stuff that's fun, playing competitive games with friends, and then playing some Saints Row the Third with retainers in our mouths that make it hard to speak. And then we're going to be playing a game kind of like Pictionary, but instead we try to guess what people are telling us to do in Saints Row with a retainer in their mouth. That's what we're going to be doing. What are you going to be doing?
I'm going to be playing Mobius Final Fantasy.
Oh, that's bad. On Saturday in the morning, I'm going to be playing Gears of War with a Guitar Hero controller, so that's pretty bad. But then we're both going to be playing Final Fantasy 13 for like 12 hours.
12 hours.
And what are we going to do to make that more pleasant for ourselves?
I came up with the idea of using a roulette wheel to subject us to, as I would put it, Final Fantasy 13 is already going to remove my Sanctus Spiritus from my being. So we have possible donation incentives that are called minor annoyances. So I've tasked you with creating 12 minor annoyances for me to subject me to, and I have selected 12 minor annoyances for you. Yes. And the way that it works is your wheel has 12 spots, correct?
Yes.
Was it 12 spots? So we could, in theory, if the donations work, do 2 rotations. We got plenty of stuff. We got a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So the way that it works is that these 2 columns, they have 12 things. Gino annoyances onto me, and Chris's annoyances onto Gino. The way the donations work is if you go to my page on Pencils of Promise, I'll do a blog at some point, sometime,
or my page.
Somewhere. My page preferably, because I'm trying to beat Gino this year.
Or my page.
My page. Do my page. I'm better. I bring entertainment to the people. I'm a better human being, and I have a better sense of taste than Gino.
Well, as of right now,
video games and food.
It looks like one of us has raised more, and it would be important. Just follow where the money's already at. The market has spoken.
Someone decided to pony up their own money to boost their own page to the #1 page on the Giant Bomb Community Endurance Run 8.
Look, that's because I have so much confidence and I believe so much in the cause we're raising money for that I'm willing to put my money where my mouth is, unlike some people on this podcast. So you should donate to the person who has the authenticity to donate.
Whatever. I mean, to the person who's using corruption and their power to give themselves an easy start.
The wheels, I feel I should tell you, I have 2 wheels, so we can have 2 separate wheels with the minor annoyances.
Okay, so the whole idea is that if you donate $5, you can announce which one of the minor annoyances you would like, and I believe the theory is, although if you have 2 wheels, then we just need people to donate $5, and then we can have a Chris wheel and then a Gino wheel.
Yes, and we will alternate which wheel is spun so that the minor annoyances are not just you over and over and over again.
Okay. So at $5, you son of a bitch! I didn't know you had 2 wheels. So
I didn't know I had 2 wheels.
That completely changes the game.
I forgot my sister. I got a wheel for myself, and she got a wheel somehow for her own shenanigans.
That changes everything.
I'm sorry.
That changes everything.
So we have a table of minor annoyances.
Let's go over the donation incentives, because now I kind of have to change these, and I guess we have to talk about it. $5 originally was put your supposed donation incentive into the box of good ideas, and after a donation thing gets picked on the wheel of a minor annoyances, it is removed, and then we pick from the box. But I guess now we don't need the $5 donation incentive.
I mean, we still do, yeah, because we'll eventually, for each of us, run out. We can replace things when they're done with the new thing.
Okay.
Same thing. Just 2 wheels.
Okay, so $5 now, you get to just pick a thing. And your pick...
Within reason.
You get to pick a thing and you get to put it on the wheel. We would prefer that once someone has picked one of the minor annoyances that you pick a different one. Because some of these are going to be fairly difficult to duplicate, is my problem. What say you, Gino?
I think that makes sense. So how much is spinning the wheel? I think...
Okay, spinning the wheel should be 20.
10 or 20. $20, we spin the wheel. So $5, it goes into the idea bucket, and we use the idea bucket to replenish the wheel when it is spun too many a time. And then $20, we will spin the wheel. And let me just give you some previews of some things that we might have to do as we're playing Final Fantasy 13. On my list...
You read your box. You read your boxes.
So on my list of minor annoyances to afflict you with, my ideas... Number 1, ZP has to explain in excruciating detail why Taco Bell is bad.
That's going to be difficult.
Another one, ZP must say only nice things about vegetables for 10 minutes.
It's going to be really hard.
And then I also have a fun one. It's called The Abyss Stares Back.
I don't know what that means.
I know. I'm not going to explain it here. I'm going to explain it in the future.
What?
But that's a little teaser.
Okay. All right.
I
had the common courtesy of explaining what everything on my list was. I don't know why you have to have mysteries on yours. I think the one that I really like is ZP has to play a game of Sacramento Kings player or JRPG side character.
Yeah, at this point I don't think that you know half of the players on the team or who were on the team recently.
I know the team right now, and I really know the team during the Weber era.
Yep.
And then when Chris Weber left because he wanted a future, I stopped caring about basketball because my team died.
It's true. So on your list, what do you have for me?
Okay, so I did a little bit of everything. I have multiple occurrences of reading fan fiction. You also have fan fiction represented, but I decided to take something that you truly love. That is Final Fantasy IX, and I am now going to add that this is a dramatic reading of Final Fantasy IX /fiction.
Oh, no. I hate slash fiction.
I also have
much.
Just normal fan fiction for Final Fantasy 13. Oops, I think I'm accidentally writing things on the boxes.
You are. You're writing 0 onto this.
Yeah. Remember, my keyboard's broken because I spilled coffee on it.
Right.
So just click Control-Z. Just make it all...
I got it. I fixed it. I
think probably one of my favorites is... So I also have things, I went very off topic on multiple occurrences. For example, one of my things is Gino spends 10 minutes saying nothing but nice things about Phil Jackson's run as the head executive of the New York Knicks, which you have said that you could probably do.
I can probably do that.
It's going to hurt you.
I won't like it.
Yeah, it's not going to hurt you.
I'll be lying a bunch.
I mean, if I really, Gino, you have to give me that is a minor annoyance, right?
It's very minor. It is.
Yes, I mean, if it was the table of soul crushing follies, it would be Isaiah Thomas.
Oh.
I don't think that's possible. That would actually hurt you to do Isaiah Thomas.
That would not be great.
Gino has to say nothing but nice things about what he's witnessing and experiencing in Final Fantasy 13 for 10 minutes. That is going to hurt.
Fuck.
I think my table is way worse than yours. Do you think? I think mine's is actually worse.
Worse as in for me to appreciate?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
I think yours is a little nice because you're trying to teach me, like say nice things about vegetable. You got rid of eat a salad, which I don't appreciate. If I promised you, if you returned eat a salad, if I promised that it was vegetarian or vegan, would you put it back in?
I'll put back eat a salad.
You can think about that. Number 6, for those that are audiophiles or follow the wonderful world of audio music, number 6 is Gino listens to 3 tracks as selected by ZP from Corey Feldman's iconic album, Angelic to the Core, which I consider to be the worst album in music history.
So this is what we're doing on Saturday. We'll be playing Final Fantasy 13 and doing this nonsense. And then, what are you doing on Sunday?
I'm playing Final Fantasy X-2, the last mission.
Well, enjoy that. So, come for the Final Fantasy, stay for the Final Fantasy.
Wait, Gino. You're playing games that you like.
Yes.
For the most part.
For the most part, yes.
I'm playing games that make me miserable. I feel like you are not holding up your end of the bargain to our fair listeners and our community and our donators.
You know,
you need to sacrifice something. This is like you're an Italian. You know about sacrifice.
I know about sacrifice. I do.
It's time to sacrifice. It's time to contribute something to the cause, to the religion, to the Pope demands it. The Pope demands you bleed a little right now.
I don't know what the Pope demands.
This is the video game Pope.
I don't know what I don't know what the space Pope wants of me, but
Larry Bird from Charles Barkley Shut Up and Jam asks you.
He died for our sins.
He asks you.
I'm not going to do anything.
Give yourself a little pain.
I'm hosting people. Also, you last year ate Vienna sausages until you got food poisoning.
Oh yeah, one of the other
you almost got delirious.
Is free.
Speaking of that, let's go to feedback. So if you want to go ahead and donate to the Giant Bomb Community Endurance Run, you can do so at fundraise.pencilsofpromise.org/GBCER VIII, because we use Roman numerals up in this thing.
Okay. Real quick, Gino, before we do this,
yes.
What do you think is the hardest thing on my column right now for you? It's going to actually
the thing that's going to suck
upset you the most.
Probably writing a jingle for Vienna sausages.
Okay, so that's one of them. He has to write and sing a commercial jingle for Vienna sausages.
And
I gotta say the one that actually legitimately has me concerned is your one about wrestling. The one where ZP has to justify the existence of a randomly selected assortment of wrestling characters without using racism or xenophobia as the explanation. That is because I know what you're going to do. You're going to find a list of the most offensive wrestlers to ever exist, and it's going to be hard.
Yeah.
You're going to make this impossible.
You found the game. Actually, I think the Abyss Stares Back is going to be the worst, but I'm not going to tell you what it is yet. So,
okay.
So there you go. You should donate if you donate. We've got all these donation incentives. There are other events coming out every day. We're making announcements constantly on GiantBomb.com in the forums. You can find it on the front page under Giant Bomb Community Endurance Run or in the top of the forums. But we're constantly making announcements. We just announced Nikki Rooney's Footlunky. Or not Footlunky, Foothead. So it's Cuphead, but with feet and other weird things. So go ahead. It's fundraise.pencilsofpromise.org/GBCER VIII. So, without further ado, speaking of you hurting yourself in Vienna sausages, we have some feedback that we read last week during the regular show, but I'm going to read again so that you can respond. This comes in, and if you want to get in touch with the show, you can do so, deeplistens.libsyn.com. Hit up our comments sections, deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com, or at deeplistenspod on Twitter. This comes from Angel, who says, was Chris drunk on this podcast? This was in response to the Community Endurance Run 8 announcement episode. He says, Was Chris drunk on this podcast? I'm not trying to be rude, but he seemed to be slurring his words during this bit. Just trying to share a possible concern. Also, can Gino please ban food donation incentives? They always make people miserable for not enough money. And on Hell, we have basically banned food donation incentives. No one is doing anything that is
Wait, what? No, Nicky Rooney's eating blood sausage, right?
But he wants to eat blood sausage. It's not a, gross out thing. Blood sausage is totally reasonable. Like, he's just cooking a blood sausage. It's not like
the thing about it is that I don't know why the Vienna sausages upset my stomach so much.
Because they're poor quality meat that is in a can for Lord knows how long, chock full of preservatives, and you don't cook them well.
God, Gino.
Do you cook them at all when you eat them?
No, they're pre-cooked. Okay, Gino, first off, there's no science to say that preservatives or phosphates are actually bad for you if you actually follow the research. Second thing, I can eat canned fish and canned sardines, and I quite enjoy those. They're just a little oily.
I mean, it is a low-quality meat, and the sulfates might not be bad for you in a, cosmic sense, but if your stomach does not have a lot of something, getting a sudden, intense dose of it might upset your stomach.
Yeah, I actually know the feeling of that.
Trash.
It actually just tastes like gelatinous corned beef, which I know you know what corned beef tastes like from memory, but it's basically just meat given the same spices and boiled in the brine that is similar to corned beef. And it tastes quite similar to corned beef, but it does not have the texture.
Yeah, but that is gross. Corned beef does not have an amazing taste to start with. And then if you told me we took corned beef but made it have the texture of a Jell-O, I would say gross. Fuck that.
But that's all sandwich meat, Gino.
Not the good sandwich meat.
Salami.
I don't generally eat salami that much. Or when I ate meat, I did not eat much salami.
Okay.
So,
antipasto.
I think that gets us back. And in terms of you being drunk on the podcast, you
already talked about how I was I was in a previously. It's part of the reason why I took a break from Giant Bomb. I was never invited to your podcast, rightfully so, because I am a train wreck of a human being that rarely contributes anything intellectually, but definitely contributes something emotionally.
That's true.
I was in a car accident. I had a concussion, which was the weirdest part of it. So I know, Gino, your wife has some experiences with concussions, and I'm sorry to bring that up. But what really caught me by surprise in terms of my recovery of that was I didn't develop my symptoms for the concussion. So originally, I went to a birthday party, right? The same day.
No.
The same day of my, when the accident happened, I went to my sister's birthday party.
No, that was a big mistake. When you take a head injury like that, you will feel okay for a little bit, but it's just like spraining your ankle or something. You feel good, and then the next day, all of that extra damage you did by playing on it comes up.
Yeah, and so I was on the can, just throwing my guts up.
Oh, wow. It was that bad?
Yeah, it was pretty bad. I was rejecting water at one point.
Oh, that's no good. Yeah, sunglasses, you need someone to help you so you don't have to get up.
And apparently there was suspicion that I may have done some damage to some lower guts parts, which is why the doctor said, because red meats and processed meats are difficult to process, I recommend that you try to eat a plant-based diet for as long as possible.
So you're a vegetarian now too. Hooray! Welcome to the gang.
I get to end it. I get to end it actually this Thursday.
You can, but you won't.
I will, because I'm going to a barbecue to celebrate the beginning of spring break.
You can, but you won't.
I love meat, Gino. I know that you're a plant eater. I have actually a great deal of respect for you now. I don't know how you do it. I do not know how you do it.
It's not that hard.
It's actually pretty hard. I mean, actually balancing your protein so as that you don't feel anemic, especially for someone who's trying to be a vegetarian for the first time in their life, is difficult.
Yeah,
and then
you make it work.
Getting the proteins that have full proteins and not partial proteins, like, oh, I'm just going to eat a bunch of chickpeas. Oh, wait, this doesn't have full protein, so this doesn't really count.
I mean, it counts, but it's not enough.
All right,
yeah, you make it work.
So yeah, that was miserable.
Well, I'm glad you're feeling better, and you were slurring because you were on muscle relaxants. So
yeah, it was a bad thing.
Yep.
And I learned a lot. I learned that I should not be listening to the Final Fantasy X First Part 1 podcast while driving a car.
No. Oh, no.
So that's what I was listening to. It was not the reason why I got into the accident, but it was what I was listening to as it happened.
So what you're saying is our podcast is an actual train wreck?
Yes, it actually tried to kill me.
That's amazing. And also terrifying. I'm glad you're okay. So without further ado, let's discuss the Final Fantasy trading card game.
All right.
So let's start off. People who are frequent listeners of the show know that I am a huge Magic the Gathering player. I play all the time. I've been playing for over a decade. We do regular Magic the Gathering coverage. So that's my familiarity with trading card games. What is yours, ZP?
I don't play them at all. I am actually, and I've kind of talked to you about this, I am not a fan of the trading card game format. I think the last time I was seriously invested in a trading card game, probably the Star Wars trading card game, way back when, in the early 90s, early 2000. Do you remember the old school Star Wars trading card game?
Yes, I do.
I played that pretty well. And then, like any kid, I collected Pokemon cards, but I never learned how to play Pokemon cards.
I had to work a birthday party that was Pokemon card focused, so I had to learn how to play. That game's okay.
That game is really janky, though.
It's really broken.
The right now version of Pokemon cards, like, man, these combos are fucked.
Yeah. The game's broken, but it's fun.
And
I played Yu-Gi-Oh! I played Magic.
Yu-Gi-Oh! Let's talk about a game with the jankiest combo system I have ever seen, and the most unbalanced trap system I have ever seen. It's like, I'm going to attack you. Well, I have a trap card that just wipes the board, and now you're dead.
What an idiot. You tried to attack me.
But I will say that part of the reason why I was never invested in trading cards games is because I was a tabletop, and I still am a tabletop and board game fan. When it comes to card games, I've always, and I've talked to you about this, I've always preferred living card games, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And just, my thing is I like deck creation games. I like rummy-style games. Like a good rummy-style game would be something like Ticket to Ride. And a deck creation game would be something kind of like Dominion. Or, shoot, I would even say that something like Blue Moon Cities or Blue Moon in general. These are card games where the cards that are provided in the game are kind of already clearly defined. Which ones you have at your disposal to deal with the situations really comes up to you. And I know it's considered more of a cooperative game, but I find elements of it are very much related to cards. But one of my favorite games, and still is my favorite game ever, is Pandemic, which there's no competitive card game. I feel like,
Makes sense.
And I think I play Magic the Gathering maybe once or twice. We've talked about this before when I tried to advise people how to have fun with Magic the Gathering. I think I play Magic the Gathering maybe once or twice every year when one of my friends that plays Magic the Gathering is like, hey, there's a new duel deck. Can I play with you and just kind of practice my techniques? And it's like, yeah, I kind of feel like you're treating me like the AI during practice mode on Smash, but sure, whatever. Tell me how to play the cards, because I don't know how to put things in stasis.
That is fair. Suspend, I think, is what you mean, based on the dual decks you've talked about before. But I feel like having some of the Magic the Gathering stuff will at least get you set for the Final Fantasy trading card game, because the game was developed by, let me actually find the name of the lead developer, because he is a Magic the Gathering pro. And it shows. This game is very Magic the Gathering, very much it feels kind of like a mod of Magic the Gathering. Okay, so the lead developer of the Final Fantasy trading card game is card types, gameplay. Where's development?
So I guess I can. Oh man, can I ask you something? This is just something that I've always wondered in general as someone who's not been invested. Is there actually anything different between a trading card game and a collectible card game? TCGs and CCGs. Is there actually a difference, or is one all squares or rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares?
Yeah. So most trading card games are collectible card games, but they do not necessarily. You can have games that are collectible, but you cannot, play them against someone competitively. I think TCG and I think those specific are pretty much the same, collectible card and trading card. Though I feel like trading card games generally imply a competitiveness, whereas collectible cards, you can just collect them without having a way to play against someone else. Okay, I can't find who the lead developer is, but the lead developer is a Magic the Gathering pro and out of Japan. So this game is very similar. If you've played Magic the Gathering, you will feel very familiar. Cards come into play active, which is untapped. When they attack, they turn sideways, or dull, which means they tap. You attack your opponent instead of their creatures directly, or not creatures, they're forwards, and then they decide how to block, just like in Magic. You pay crystal points instead of mana. However, the big divergences from Magic the Gathering are there are no lands. Instead, there are backup slots. So you've got basically Final Fantasy characters from throughout Final Fantasy history, and they are distributed, at least in the early the early opuses, which are the early sets of the game. There are 3 card types: forward, backup, and summon. Forwards are basically like creatures in Magic. Backups are like lands; they produce crystal points. And summons are like instants and sorceries. They just have a one-time effect and then go to the discard pile, or the break zone, as they're called in the FF TCG. And because they only have these 3 card types, they actually have introduced a 4th card type in a most recent release. But because they have only these 3 or 4 card types, they kind of compress a lot of the effects and abilities into these 3 types that you would otherwise have spread across several in Magic the Gathering.
You're making it a bit more complicated than it needs to be. If you know Magic the Gathering or any card game ever, what you know about the elemental system in Magic the Gathering, basically it's the same thing.
Well, it's kind of. So
it's basically the same thing.
The big difference is in Magic the Gathering, every card has a cost that is a combination of any color of mana and specific colors. And you need to pay, if something costs 3 green, you have to pay 3 green. In the Final Fantasy trading card game, cards are one type of, well, at least for right now, they are one color. And there are 8 elements that cards can fit into. Fire, water, wind, earth, lightning, and ice. Those are the main 6. And then there's also light and dark. So the main 6, they are, a specific color, and then you must pay at least 1 crystal point of that color to play that card.
Yep.
And then light and dark are unique. You can pay for them with any combination of colors, but you can only have 1 light card in play at a time or 1 dark card in play at a time. 1 light and 1 dark card at most. So if you have 1 light card in play, you can't play a second. And the way you get resources is a little bit different than Magic. Magic, you play lands to make mana. You can get crystal points in the Final Fantasy trading card game 2 ways. You can play backups, which basically function like lands. You turn them sideways to generate 1 crystal point. And you can do that every turn, once per turn. But you can also discard cards from your hand or break them, as the term is in the Final Fantasy trading card game. And when you discard a card from your hand, it generates 2 crystal points of its color. So if you discard a water card, it will make 2 water crystal points. And then you basically use a combination of the crystal points from your backups and the crystal points you discard to pay for your cards as you play them. And then it's very much like Magic. Cards can't attack the turn they come into play. There are even like combat abilities like First Strike that function exactly the same as they do in Magic. One of the other big differences is that every card has one number for power or toughness. So instead of a power toughness split, every card is basically a square card, if you know Magic the Gathering terminology. Everything's a 2/2, 3/3, 4/4, except instead it's 9,000, 5,000, 2,000. Yeah. And that determines their power.
So, as someone who's not entirely invested in Magic or trading card games, a lot of the same mechanisms from Magic the Gathering are in the Final Fantasy trading card game. For example, Gino and I, when we created our decks, we bought starter packs. We bought booster packs that basically had a finite number of cards with a suite of cards that were defined in the package.
Yeah, they were 50 card decks, and every deck in Final Fantasy trading card game, they are 50 cards always.
It is strongly recommended that if you're even tangentially interested in trying it out, to buy one of these starter packs.
Yeah,
as
and
your default.
Unlike most starter packs for other sets, for other types of trading card games, the starters in the Final Fantasy trading card game are actually quite good.
They have some cards that are very valuable and very good and are highly rated within the Final Fantasy trading card game community.
Yeah, like within the competitive scene, I would recommend... I'm a little biased, but the Final Fantasy IX starter is actually legitimately really good. Like, there's a lot of really good cards in there, and it gives you multiple copies of the ones you need. So that one's really good. The Final Fantasy 13 one is also very good.
Very good. Now,
you took the Final Fantasy 10 one, though.
And it is not as good as the other decks, and it's very apparent that it's not as good. Because here's the thing, is that some of these elements actually do have different, not necessarily, it's not as different as, say, Magic the Gathering, where like the elements basically define how you play the game, but the different elements play differently ever so slightly. So
yeah, I would say it's very similar to Magic. Like the distinction between the colors, like there's a little bit more overlap because there's 6 colors to distribute abilities that in Magic are distributed across 5. So some of them have a little bit of actually there's 8 colors, except light and dark are basically do anything. They're just super powerful. They are kind of poorly defined in terms of what their feel is. They're just generally like big heroes and big villains that are super powerful. But each of the colors or each of the elements in the Final Fantasy trading card game has its own feel. And I could go over them if you want.
Now, this is going to highlight one of my biggest problems because it is not very clear until after you start interacting with these cards what those elemental affinities mean and how that translates in terms of gameplay. So I was like, man, I love Final Fantasy X. I'm going to buy the Final Fantasy X pack. Oh, wow, I got green magic and blue magic. Huh, that sounds cool. Oh, blue magic's all about summoning things. Huh.
No.
Well, sure, that, I guess, works out. Oh, there's not that many things to summon. There's only like 6 cards, right? Huh. And now all of the cards I've drawn aren't the cards that I need to summon. Oh, okay, well, I guess I'll just stick with the green cards. And green cards are all about, for me, in the Final Fantasy X deck, is about forming parties with YRP. Oh, wait, I haven't drawn Riku yet. Oh, huh.
So that's actually hitting on a few different things. So let me take on the element part first. The elements, each of them has their own strengths and weaknesses. I think that water has a lot, like you said, it has a lot of summon focus. It's got a lot of basic units, just a lot of synergies, like these cards are going to boost the team. They're going to pump the squad. And it's got a lot of like card drawing. Just like I'm going to do some general card drawing and get some, incremental advantage sort of stuff. Very few of the water cards are devastatingly powerful unto themselves. They tend to be underpowered relative to their cost, but they tend to have either a team pumping effect or some sort of card advantage where they're drawing you cards or helping, play for the long game. Fire is very aggressive, as you would expect. It does a lot of direct damage. It stops people from blocking. Many of its cards have like slants where they will be more powerful attacking than they are blocking. That tends to be its deal. Wind is very much about tapping and untapping things. Wind has a lot of cards that are very evasive, like they can't be blocked by things that are more powerful than them. It's got a lot of forming teams, like you said. All of the Chocobo cards right now, I think, are in the Wind element. And Chocobo cards are really good at forming parties with other cards and making everyone way stronger than they would be normally. The Earth element is about individually powerful cards. Like everything they play, it's hard to screw with their stuff, and they tend to be very efficient. They're just big, dumb idiots who beat you to death. Ice is a lot about dulling your opponent and discard. It's got a lot of just like go after your opponent's hand, tap their stuff down, get around them because they can't act, and then it's even got some like creature destruction based on whether things are dull or not. And there's also this ability called Freeze, where you tap a card and it doesn't untap for a turn. So Ice is really a tempo element. And then Lightning is also kind of a tempo element, but with a different feel. It's got a lot of haste. It's got some direct damage. It's got some minusing, where like it gives a forward like minus 4,000 power, and it can kill things that way. And it's got some powerful like destroy effects. So each of them has their own feel, and water is roughly analogous to blue in Magic.
Yeah.
Ice has a little bit of blue in it as well. Red is very similar to, or fire is very similar to red. Ice gets a little bit of blue, a little bit of black. Lightning gets a little bit of black, a little bit of red. So the color pie is very similar in the distribution.
So, here's my advice. Don't do what I did, which is I picked the Final Fantasy game I like, because the play style for my cards is not how I play these games. I'm all about DPS, damage, and maybe a few status ailments or tricks up my sleeve here and there. So actually, for me, in hindsight, Earth and Fire Magic would have been more of my play style. But I like Final Fantasy X. I saw Titus and Yuna on the box art and was like, I'm going to play Final Fantasy X cards.
No,
don't do that.
I actually disagree, because the Final Fantasy trading card game actually manages to do something I think pretty unique. Every single card has a few different markers that it cares about, and they include the card's name, the actual Final Fantasy game it came from, and then there's also the element, and then the ability written on the card. A lot of times the Final Fantasy characters synergize well with cards from the same game. Mm-hmm. And you can actually build, I think almost all of the Final Fantasies at this point have certain cards that just like when you play them, let you find another card from the same game and just put it into your hand or put it into play. So, or like your YRP cards, your Yuna, Riku, Pain cards, they really incentivize you to play Yuna and Riku and Pain. And if you're doing that, they become much more powerful than they are if you just, grab bagged here and there. Okay. So I think that overall they've managed to ride this line where many of the cards are super synergistic within their own game and incentivize you to play like the whole gang, which is kind of fun. Like the Final Fantasy IX synergies are really, really powerful, kind of apart from the fact that you're playing, a specific color set. Like red and fire and water have the most Final Fantasy IX characters, but you can totally just, find as many FF9 characters as you can and kind of combine any two elements and then make a Final Fantasy IX deck. It's really interesting. It's almost like tribal decks in Magic the Gathering, except the tribe is whatever Final Fantasy game you care about. And there's also tribal effects as well. Like you can make a Dragoon deck that cares about all of the Dragoons across Final Fantasy's history, and all of them synergize with Dragoons. There's a bunch of ninjas that care about ninjas. And so you can go a whole bunch of different directions, which I think is really interesting. It's a cool game. Cool concepts.
I know this is kind of like super technical, but I actually want to jump into this. Do you have some of your cards in hand?
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to talk about some few pet peeves about mines. So let's actually talk about the cards themselves. I like the card stock that they used. It's a nice sturdy card stock.
Yeah, I like the back.
I like the back of it. That's a nice black. I do prefer black on the thing, but Final Fantasy, the trading card game, is guilty of doing one thing that I really hate. First off, the cards are small. They're slightly smaller than the normal cards that you use for these trading card games.
I will say they fit right into a Magic the Gathering card sleeve.
They do, but they are smaller.
Just a little bit.
Okay. Second thing, there is no border on these cards.
Yep.
I do not like cards that do not have borders.
I like the borderlessness. I like that.
I absolutely disagree. Because my problem is that the borders always are the kind of like the parts that you grab and you don't feel bad about having Cheeto dust on your fingertips because no one gives a shit about your borders. So by grabbing the corners of any part of this card, you are kind of soiling or slowly soiling any part of the artwork. Now, that leads me to my second biggest thing. Do you actually want to talk about borders? Because that's kind of a nitty-gritty kind of thing. I don't like borderless cards. I like
borderless cards. I like as much of the card to be art as possible. And I do like that some of the cards use art from like concept art or hand-drawn art. Some of them
So let me say this real quick.
Yeah.
The biggest problem about the artwork is how inconsistent it is. Because sometimes you'll have Final Fantasy V cards and it'll use the kind of cutesy chibi artwork that you saw in the manual. Sometimes it will do the beautiful, beautiful hand-drawn artwork that you saw in the posters and the box art. And that applies to Final Fantasy VI, which is super offensive because there are some cards that use the Nintendo DS artwork. And the biggest offender would have to be the Final Fantasy VII cards, where I feel like there is 5 different disparate art styles used on those cards. Yeah, there's the manual artwork, or basically the artwork that you would see if you read the manual. There is the hand-drawn box art artwork. They use the assy-looking pre-rendered CG artwork where everyone looks like a box. Then they use the Final Fantasy HD remaster artwork that was just in a trailer from E3, and then they use like the Crisis Core and Advent Children artwork.
Yeah, it's a real grab bag. I would say that the biggest offender for me is the cards that come from Dissidia. Some of them have the Dissidia hand-drawn art, and that's fine. They just look like anime characters. But some of them use the actual Dissidia polygonal models. And those things are low res and do not look good.
They look like it's literal scans from a PSP game.
Yeah, it's scans of a PSP game. Not iconic. But you get some cards like the Waka card that is Waka and everyone with their hands in from the awesome cutscene, and that's perfect. And it's full art.
And I know you're not a fan of Final Fantasy XII, but I showed you, hey, wow, they used the rejected artwork for Vaughn, where he's an actual pirate dude. That's awesome. Great. That's awesome. This is the character model they probably should have used. But so the artwork is
hit and miss.
It's going to piss some people off that they just didn't use one consistent artwork across all the cards. And the big problem I have with this is how certain games are represented in this card game. It's fucked. Like, how many of your backup cards are just random bozos from Final Fantasy V or 3?
I mean, most of mine are, but that's because I was building a deck to specifically exploit them.
So, I know. So, how certain Final Fantasy games are represented in this card game, it is not equitable.
Well, so let me just dive in as someone who has read almost all of the cards. The way that they represent 5 and 3, the games that really are just an assemblage of random characters that you kind of make your. They're generally archetypes. there are maybe 2 or 3 named characters, maybe a party full of named characters,
Sure.
but everything else is just archetypes that are filling roles. They've basically made all of the common cards in this game be taken up by just random jobs.
Job classes from
Jobs
5,
classes.
3, and even some of the earlier games.
Yes. And
which my problem is I'm sick and fucking tired of looking at these cards for games that I have no personal investment in, and I'm just using these bullshit common cards that have the same kind of assy-looking artwork.
Well, so from a design perspective, those cards, those assy-looking commons, you can play multiples of them. There's a weird kind of legendary rule in the Final Fantasy trading card game. You cannot have 2 cards of the same name in play at the same time unless they are a standard unit, like a ninja, a generic ninja. But if you have a cloud in play, you can only have 1 cloud. There are like 4 or 5 different cloud cards, but you can only have 1 of them in play at a time, which means that the other ones, if you have them, are trapped in your hand until your other cloud dies. Or I think they're trapped in your hand. I don't think you can even play a new one and then kill the old one. You basically just are stuck. You have to. This is your cloud. Your other clouds are useless. So the standard units, these generic units, give you the ability to just stack them up, and that's basically how a lot of the tribal decks are built. Your standard units will fill in because there are only so many ninjas in Final Fantasy's history, but you can play as many cards, as many common ninjas as you want, pretty much.
Okay. Now, I understand where you're coming from, but it is really weird, say, if you want to create a Final Fantasy VII deck and you have 5 different styles of artwork represented in your deck versus a coherent artwork style. Take Magic the Gathering. When I use a deck from Magic the Gathering, it is evoking a location. It is evoking a place. There's like a feel to the cards, right? You feel like, oh, I'm being transported to the plane of Bumblefuck and Evil Town. That doesn't happen with Final Fantasy, the trading card game, because these cards have no consistent art style.
I mean, it works for me, but that's because I've played almost all of the games that this is referencing, so for me the nostalgia works. But I agree that from a design perspective and an aesthetic perspective, if they had curated it just a little bit more, it would have been better for the, general fan. But I don't know that this game is for them. Like, this is very much a fan game for Final Fantasy fans.
But if it was a fan game, I think you would probably want to use the best possible artwork for each game.
I don't know, because some people get nostalgic about other things. Like, they just released Dissidia cards. There's an Echo card now. You can play Echo.
Mobius Final Fantasy, you mean?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, there were Dissidia cards. I mean Mobius. There are Mobius Final Fantasy cards. I have no love for that. There are World of Final Fantasy cards, and I have no love for that. But some people do. And I think that it's also interesting that for some of these games that are basically homages unto themselves, like Theater Rhythm and World of Final Fantasy, this is also where you get kind of some dual synergies, where a card will be of type Theater Rhythm and also type Final Fantasy VIII, and it will have both synergies on both sides, which is kind of interesting. World of Final Fantasy, man, the cards from that game, it's like, why? It's a game we've made in this fan game, a trading card for a character who's only in this other fan game. Weird.
All right. So can you go back to looking at your card real quick?
Yeah.
There's another nitpicky thing that just drives me crazy, and I hate to bring this up because I am going to talk about the gameplay, guys. I promise that I'm not going to be just this weird crazy person who's talking about things that don't mean anything. Here's my problem. And this is, again, a nitpicky thing that, maybe someone from Kickstarter who's trying to kickstart their board game or card game would make, but not a commercial fucking product. So you see how it says backup. It also does the description. It also does the title. And it also says what kind of unit it is. I'm looking at a thief card, and it says standard unit, and it has the description and then what kind of card it is, correct?
Yep.
Okay, so where it says standard unit, notice how that is a sans serif font. And notice how the rest of the card is a serif font. Also notice that when it talks about kind of the thing for your card, mine says put thief into the breakstone, : the colon doesn't fucking line up with the words.
Huh. Yeah, it is a little off.
The font on these cards is bad. It's bad. I cannot believe in the year of our Lord 2018, a designer did not notice that they put a serif and sans serif font on the same fucking card. I'm sorry. I have to say that.
I will throw out there, like, some of the earlier sets, some of the English was a little shaky, and some of the rules were a little shaky.
The early cards were hideous. There were a couple of live streams where I was bugging you and we were literally laughing at how bad the font and the translation of the cards were.
Yeah, they've gotten better. So I think that some of it was just early translation issues, which honestly in this day and age, Square shouldn't have anymore.
They're one of the largest video game companies in the world. They're making almost $1 billion on video games.
Yeah, they should be able to translate their shit the first time they do it, but, you know.
Now, before we really jump into your perspective versus my perspective, I think it's full disclaimer to anyone who's listening to this podcast. Gino and I kind of reached a different conclusion, but one thing we need to make absolutely clear to anyone who's even thinking about this is a trading card game. Okay? You are looking at an investment to have a deck anywhere between $30 to $50. Okay? Now, Gino will say, there's ways to create a deck that doesn't completely break the bank. However, you are still looking at an investment of anywhere between $30 to $50. And you need to be aware that while Final Fantasy, the trading card game, is not as bad as Magic or Yu-Gi-Oh! In terms of just how screwed up the economy is for the cards, there are still cards out there that will completely destroy your financial well-being. And
yeah, there are some that are better than others, and they'll be more expensive.
And the problem is that leads to a very large chasm between playing this game casually versus playing this game competitively, which is ingrained and a part of the DNA for collectible card games. And I just want to say a few more things. While Final Fantasy is still cheaper to play, I would actually say you should probably just not play this game and you should just get into Magic. Now, here's the reason why. I triple checked, and because the community for Final Fantasy, the trading card game, is so small, I do not have a single person in my vicinity I can play this game with. If I had invested into starting a starter deck with Magic and kind of took the time to learn that, my $30 bumblefuck of a card deck that I created, I could have at least played it with a community. Now, it has every bit of the trappings of a trading card game. And yes, the expense is somewhat mitigated by the fact that the cards themselves are collectibles. And, a smart speculation could say that you could net a profit. And actually, I did the math, and if I sold my valuable cards from my starter deck, I could maybe make my money back. I mean, if Gino, as a Magic the Gathering fan, could go back in time to 1993 and buy a handful of Moxes and Black Lotuses, he would basically be the nerd equivalent of Biff Tannen from Back to the Future 2.
Yep.
But because it is a collectible card game, there is constant support. There are new expansions. They are creating new techniques, new combos, new ways to create parties.
New card types entirely.
New card types. And here's the deal. That continues to incentivize people who are already a part of the economy and community to continue to buy these cards. However, it basically guarantees that it has all of the accessibility problems that are indicative of the collectible card game and trading card game format.
Sure. It is still a trading card game.
Yes. I mean, Magic the Gathering has 15,000 cards.
More.
Final Fantasy doesn't even come close. But there is an irreducible complexity to this game, and in the end, it has all of the exploitative trappings of a trading card game.
Yes.
Every single one, because it is a trading card game, and it cannot – I mean, I could put a chandelier in a haunted house, a fancy chandelier, and change the rugs, but it is still a haunted house.
Sure, but now let me just say, like that $30 to $50 to make a deck, that is actually reasonable. You could make a decent deck.
Oh yeah, sure, and it's far. I would say making a deck in Final Fantasy is not just easier, but it is far less expensive than Magic.
It's far less expensive. There are some decks that are legitimately like tournament playable that are in the $30 to $50 range.
Modern format decks could easily run anywhere between $500 to $1,000.
Yeah, in Magic Modern, you can easily spend $1,000. If you want to play the best deck in Modern right now, it's easily $1,000. If you want to play a standard deck, there are individual cards that will be $20, and you will need 4 of them. So it's $80 just for 4 of your 75 cards that you'd be playing. Now, there are obviously some more budget decks in Magic, and there are budget decks in the Final Fantasy trading card game. But
like if you play Pauper.
The upper end of the Final Fantasy trading card game is not as high. There is nothing like a Tarmogoyf. There's nothing like a Jace the Mind Sculptor. These cards that are like $100 a pop. There's nothing in that ballpark. There's nothing like, legendary lands that you need to have 4 of, and each of them is, $70. There is nothing like that. The maximum number of any given card you can play is 3, and even if you're, kitting out your deck with all of the best cards, there is an inherent cost control to the Final Fantasy trading card game as it is currently constructed. And some of that is by the very nature of the design, and part of what I think makes it so brilliant in some ways. Since all of the characters are essentially legendary, you can only have one of them in play at a time. If you have one Waka, you can't play another Waka. It means that you're incentivized to diversify your deck in ways that in Magic you might not be. There are some times where the best cards in a given set are multiple versions of Cloud, and you can be punished for playing multiples of them because one Cloud will invalidate your other Clouds.
I actually hate this rule. I think it's one of my least favorite rules.
Oof.
The reason why is that you will play, say, the backup version of Waka at the beginning of the game because you need a backup to cause a constant or a steady supply of magic. And I now have Waka's best forward card. I cannot use this because I cannot just discard this card.
You can. So
you can, but there is a penalty to it.
It's not a penalty. It's how the game is meant to be played. So there are some interesting designs in this game that kind of turn card advantage on its head. If you think about it, if you play Magic the Gathering a lot, card advantage is something you learn pretty early on. The idea that having access to more cards as the game goes on, the person who has seen more cards and has drawn more cards will generally have an advantage because they've been able to do more things. They have more cards, But in the Final Fantasy trading card game, your cards in hand represent both things you can play and a resource that you can spend to play other things. So every single card can be used for something. The only cards that can get trapped in your hand with nothing to do are a light card if you've already got a light card in play, or a dark card if you've already got a dark card in play. You cannot discard one of the cards of those elements to make crystal points. Everything else, though, is basically a modal card. You've got 2 options, play it or pitch it to pay for something else. And that means that every card in your deck has way more play than something in a game of Magic. Even your most expensive cards, and by expensive I mean in crystal points, something that costs 9 crystal points can be used on turn 1 by discarding it to pay for something else. And that means that in this game, like, drawing a ton of cards is not as powerful unto itself necessarily, because it's not like you can just play them all. You're actually handicapped, you're constrained in crystal points in such a way that you always have to discard to pay for things. You can only have at most 5 backups in play at a time, which means you can have 5 renewable sources of crystal points every turn. Everything else you're going to need to discard cards. And some of the most powerful cards in the game are 6 or 7 or 8 crystal points, which are beyond what you could generate just by using your renewable resources, which means there's a constant churn. And another thing that they've done is some cards have special abilities, and these special abilities are triggered by discarding a card of the same name. So Cloud has Blade Beam, which can be used by discarding another card named Cloud, which kind of alleviates some of the stress of being, glutted on cards of the same name. You can basically cash them in to help power up the one that is in play, which is an interesting mechanic. Magic the Gathering and in Future Sight had a very similar mechanic called Grandeur, and I think that that's where it came from originally, the inspiration for this mechanic. But it leads to you being rewarded yet again for building decks that are on theme.
Okay, on theme, even though there's no theme to this game.
I mean, there's totally a theme. What are you talking about?
There's no theme. There's absolutely no theme.
I mean, it's Final Fantasy stuff.
Okay. You just kind of brought up the magic system, and I just want to say this. I hate the magic system in this game. So when you break a card, like Gino says, that you get some intrinsic reward for breaking that card. Now, if I break a card that is 1 or 2, I get 2 magic points.
Yep.
If I break a level 6 card, I get 2 magic points.
Yeah, but so
now
this is, I think, where
here's my other problem is that there are odd number cards.
It's not a problem. It's a design.
It is a problem.
It's not a problem.
It is a problem that I have with this game because Magic doesn't have this problem, and I like how Magic solves this problem.
Yeah, so
you cannot carry your leftover Magic in between rounds. Once the round is over, once your turn is over, whatever leftover Magic you have disappears. It goes into the ether.
So
if I break 2 cards, I get 4 magic points. And if I use my 4 magic points to buy like a level 3 forward, I have 1 magic point left. But I have all these cards that are 2 and 3. I can't use it.
Well, you can't use it anyway.
That point disappears. I can't just save it and carry it over into my next turn. So there's no reason to conserve your magic. You have to use it all at once.
So let me correct some things. One, in Magic the Gathering, you can't carry over your mana between phases, and it works exactly the same way in terms of crystal points. You can't pool them in Magic or in this game in that way. What you can do in Magic is spend unevenly. You can create 6 mana and then spend 3 on one and 3 on another from that same 6. In the Final Fantasy trading card game, you pay costs one at a time. When you create crystal points, if you've created 4 crystal points and then use 3 of them to play one thing, that extra 1 crystal point doesn't go into a pool that you can then use. It's gone. You have to pay for your costs exactly, or you have leftover wasted resources, which really incentivizes you to pay exactly. And if you're going to pay costs and leave extra, that means you've wasted resources. It basically makes you have to think about your moves and plan ahead. It makes backups, because backups generate 1 crystal point. They allow you to pay odd costs without having resource waste, which incentivizes you to play backups that are evenly costed first, and then start playing your odd stuff and play your cheaper cards. So it's really a strategy decision, and I think that it's an interesting one. It's one that I haven't had to consider before. You don't get to have everything. You have to pick and choose, and it's really a game where every card, like I said, is modal. Discarding your 6-cost card and to play a 2-cost card might feel bad a little bit, but as someone who's played Magic, having a 6-cost card that's trapped in your hand when you're getting beaten to death by 1 and 2 mana cards, it feels way worse than if you could turn that 6 mana card into something useful. And that is what the Final Fantasy trading card game lets you do. Every single card is useful at every single point in the game because they are both a effect and a cost and a resource.
So now here's the reason. Part of the reason why I'm going to defend my belief that there's no theme to this game. This is based off of a video game, correct? A very successful video game series. This plays nothing like the video game series.
Nope.
It plays like Magic. And I have a problem with that in terms of theming. I have a problem with that in terms of this is Final Fantasy, the trading card game. This feels like Magic, where I put stickers on the Magic card so as that now it has Final Fantasy characters on it.
Yeah.
I would have preferred if they just invented something like a completely distinct combat system that was its own thing.
No. What if it's
Absolutely
just Magic
not.
the Gathering,
I
but
feel like
Final Fantasy?
You are making a game that is basically a trading card version of your game. You have to embrace the fact that this is based off of a video game series. It's just the appropriation of my nostalgia for Final Fantasy to play Magic. And for me, that's like, oh, okay.
But if you're trying to make a perfect trading card game for Gino Grieco, you take Magic the Gathering and then alter the rules slightly. You make it more resource manipulation-y, and then you put Final Fantasy things all over it. And then you make the Final Fantasy IX cards really good. Well, then you make the little boy happy. And I love this game. And I wish I had people to play it with, but there's no one. I live near New York City, and there's no one within an hour of me. There's no store within an hour of me that has this game, so there's no community.
Here's another problem I have with this. This is a purebred TCG dueling card game. And I feel like that seriously curtails how many variants of this game we'll have. I think that there's basically no way to have any variants of this game because it is solidly a dueling game.
I think people will find a way. Love finds a way. There were not that many ways to play Magic the Gathering, and then people figured stuff out.
Look, dude, I hate to break it to you, there are a lot of dueling card games, and quite a lot of these on the market are very good. And quite a lot of these are not TCGs. They're just solid dual card games that have a defined finite number of cards that they provide in the pack. And you don't need to get yourself trapped into the TCG trappings. You can just play a solid, fun, deck builder that is a dual game.
I agree, but as someone who plays TCGs, I like the construction of this one. I think that it's really interesting. It's well made. And let me put it to you this way. I came in expecting this to be trash. I thought that it would be a cheap cash-in. The cards, some of them looked really cheap. I thought it would be chintzy. I thought the rules would be bad. I think that some of the rules need to be changed. Like, I think that extra point, the way that you... Actually, I think that their legendary rule needs to be tweaked a little bit. Like the idea of trapping a card in your hand so you can't use it except to pay for costs. I don't love that rule. I wish they just adopted Magic's legendary rule where the next one you play you have to pick and you can only keep one. There's some minor tweaks here and there, but
I also
this
don't
game's
like
actually
how
well made.
No, I disagree. I don't like how it's almost entirely a confrontational card game. I do not like how it's completely focused on the fights. It's not focused on different metagames, which I will give Magic credit. There is a metagame there that's not entirely based off of focusing on fighting and direct damage. I mean, there are alternate ways to win the game. And Final Fantasy doesn't have that. It's all combat. It's all confrontation.
There are mill strategies, but there aren't that many cards that have alternate win conditions right now.
And the alternate win conditions are on cards that are very difficult to get, and those alternate win conditions don't feel as dynamic.
Yeah, right now there aren't a ton of... I mean, it's really early. Early Magic had some combo kills and stuff like that. But
this game came out in 2011, man. It's been 7 years.
I mean, it came out in the U.S. only a year ago.
So... Yeah, one of my biggest problems is, again, it's Magic the Gathering as a card game with Final Fantasy when I feel like they should have more or less embraced the Final Fantasy aspect. I don't feel like this is a Final Fantasy game. I do not feel like I have played a card game that embraces the storied history. Let me say this. Dissidia is a more honest Final Fantasy experience than Final Fantasy the trading card game.
I don't know.
And Dissidia is just a bunch of fan servicey bullshit. But at least it embraces the fact that it's Final Fantasy fan service. This card game is, hey, I liked Magic the Gathering, but I hated some of the bullshit in Magic the Gathering, so I'm just going to commit fully to maybe 3 concepts from Magic the Gathering and boil out all of the fat.
I really disagree. I think that a lot of the Final Fantasy cards, the way that they play around within the mechanical space that they've designed really works. Like, Titus gets a stat buff when Yuna is in play. If Yuna dies, you get Titus draws cards, meaning that, if something happens to Yuna, Titus, steps up his game. There are cards like the heroes from Final Fantasy III who all boost standard units because their game was entirely about classes. It was one of the first game with classes, so they are stronger in decks that are just generic classes. That's their deal. There's stuff like the Warrior of Light from Final Fantasy I, the generic-ass dude, and his thing is boosting standard units because he is basically the first standard unit of all time, and he's just like a super-powered standard unit. There's a lot of synergies, like Quistis from Final Fantasy VIII. When you play her, she gets to play a cheap card from your hand for free, and then she boosts all of your weak cards because she's a trainer. I think that there's a lot of mechanical depth. Yuna makes summons cheaper. I think that there's a lot of overlap. Vivi does a fire spell when you cast him. They made it work.
I disagree. I think that they could have done a better job at making it work because somehow, despite the fact that the designer was like, I find problems with Magic the Gathering and I'm going to make a game to make Magic the Gathering better. And they didn't solve one of the biggest problems with Magic the Gathering. Somehow, Final Fantasy, the trading card game, is somehow slower and less aggressive than Magic the Gathering.
I disagree. You haven't played a lot. This game,
I've watched videos of it, and I feel like the strategy is creating teams, and that slows down the pace of the game.
It really depends. There's a lot of different
creating a
styles.
hugely. My thing is that my experience in learning the metagame, and sure, Gino, you can basically tell the audience that I'm not great at playing this game, but I read the rules forwards and backwards. I watched 4 or 5 tournaments, so I learned if I wanted to play this game effectively, how would I do it? And I planned it out. And the problem is that it's really incentivizing you to create a very powerful attack, whether it is creating a team or lightly spamming the same attack over the thing. It's the exact opposite of Magic in that when combined with the ability to rapidly deploy large creatures, there's variations in that approach. But in providing these variations, getting to the damage equivalent than what you could get in Magic is going to take more time.
I guess. I think that there's a lot more time at parity in this game than there is in Magic. I think that it's a lot easier to run away with the game in Magic than it is in this game. But I haven't played enough to say for sure.
And oddly enough, as someone who isn't the biggest fan of Magic, I like that part of Magic. I like being able to just, I finally figured it out. I got my cards. It's time. It's murder time. It's murder time. And maybe it's your turn to do murder time on your turn. Now, I think that we can agree one of the biggest problems with anyone interested in being a part of the Final Fantasy trading card game, this is the weakest feature of Final Fantasy, the trading card game, that is the rules and the community.
Yeah, the rules are spotty.
The rules are straight up bad.
I think that the rules just need a few tweaks here and there. I don't think that they're bad. I think they're generally okay. And the community barely exists right now in the U.S.
I'm going to let you talk for real quick because I know I've been talking. But as an outsider, maybe you as a Magic the Gathering fan, you had maybe an easier time. But as an outsider trying to get interacting with the trading card game, Final Fantasy trading card game, the rules and documentation that is provided in the quick start guide as well as these starter packs on many of the cards is terrible for anyone who is not entirely familiar with the trappings of TCGs.
Yeah, I agree.
And there are a bunch of rules that are unclear at best. There are some rules that are downright erroneous. There are typos.
Yeah,
like
there are typos.
How in the world did they publish this in the United States? And there are straight up typos and like spelling mistakes in the rule book.
Yeah, so and the rule book, you need to read an FAQ. Like, you need to understand there are complexities to this that I understood from playing Magic that the rule book did not convey, and I was like, oh, this is a question that would normally be answered in the rules of like Magic, but there's like this big gray area, what the heck? And this happened with, you know, early Magic the Gathering, but this is a game that has come out 20 years or 25 years after Magic, so it should know the answer to some of these questions up front. But I think on the whole, this game has legs.
No. There's something that kind of annoyed me that I've been meaning to bring up to you, and when we did our kind of test practice, but this is just driven me crazy.
And then we need to rank this thing.
Okay, sure. So one of my biggest problems is like there's several EX burst cards that feature the text when card or when bracket card game enters the field or when card enters the field, take X action. My problem is it's never made clear whether being drawn as damage and entering the damage zone counts as entering the field. It took me forever to find out where it's stated that the rules state that EX actions are optional, but it is not said whether the card cost must be paid or not. It took me forever. And another example of kind of poor rules is about attacking and blocking. I feel like the rule book with these two very important things is downright atrocious about explaining how to block. It states that if two cards attack as a party with a total power of 8,000, then a 6,000 power blocker could not defeat either one. But that it in itself could be defeated. That is confusing. And that took me a while to figure out. The rules also state that a 6,000 power blocker could defeat both 4,000 power attackers in isolation, but there's no text to make it clear if a single blocker can, in fact, block multiple individual attacks.
So a single blocker can block multiple attacks, but when they form a party, their combined power is what's dealt. I'm not going to go into the rules nitty-gritty. They do need to clarify it, the way that they explain some of this stuff, I agree. And again, EX Burst, we didn't mention this at all, but I think the EX Burst system is cool. You have to deal 7 damage to your opponent to win in this game, and the way that damage is represented is by taking a card off the top of your deck and putting it into the damage zone, and if that card has EX Burst, you just get a free effect. And so you can actually just fill your deck with EX Burst cards, and all of them basically have one-time effects, and you will basically get 7 free effects from people hitting you, from actually losing, which is an interesting comeback mechanic that I think helps make the game a little bit more exciting and swingy.
Sure. And for me, it's nowhere near as polished as Magic, and the artwork is occasionally a letdown.
Sure.
And it's just rough. This game is rough.
Yeah, you can lose real bad. So, let's rank it. Is the Final Fantasy trading card... currently... Here is our ranking. In first, Final Fantasy IX. Second, Final Fantasy X. Third, Final Fantasy VII. Fourth, Final Fantasy VIII. Fifth, Final Fantasy I. Sixth, Final Fantasy X-2. Seventh, Mobius Final Fantasy. And in dead last, the worst Final Fantasy game ever, Final Fantasy X-2 Last Mission. Is the Final Fantasy trading card game better than Final Fantasy IX? No.
No.
Is it better than Final Fantasy X? No.
No.
Is it better than Final Fantasy VII? No.
No.
Is it better than Final Fantasy VIII? No.
No.
Is it better than Final Fantasy I? Yes.
All right. So here's the problem. I think this is the clearest example of you like a game far more than I do. I think this is the clearest example of this since you and I had the great 7 versus 8 debate, where I clearly liked 7 more than 8, and you clearly prefer 8 over 7.
Yes.
And oh man.
Final Fantasy 1 isn't great. It's not a great game. It's like
but you could recommend Final Fantasy 1 to a person and they would be able to finish it. I don't know. See, so Gino, who do you recommend the Final Fantasy trading card game to? I find it hard to recommend it to Magic the Gathering players because there's all these janky concepts and janky mechanics that I think will just piss them off. And I don't want to recommend it to people who don't like Magic the Gathering because the community is too small and you need to be judicious about who you're playing with and if the community is there. And there are rules that I feel are just straight up complicated. More complicated than they need.
So to answer the who do I recommend it to, I've played it with Magic the Gathering players. I've introduced it to them. And as soon as I explain how this works, they tend to be fascinated by some of the intricacies and differences between it and Magic. They tend to at least think it's interesting. So I don't think that they find it annoying. At least every Magic player I've played it with and introduced it to has been like, oh, that's a really neat tweak. Because it feels like a weird mod of Magic. So I think it's easiest to pitch it to someone who is already a Magic the Gathering fan. Hey, would you like to do you like Final Fantasy? And many of them do. Would you like to try this? It's very similar to Magic. And I think that that's kind of what the pitch was from Square because Japan has a pretty large Magic the Gathering community.
I didn't know
that. But Japan's one of the bigger countries for Magic the Gathering. So much so that they actually made some anime versions of some Magic the Gathering cards specific for the Japan market.
Oh, I know about that. I thought they would be playing Vanguard.
They play that too. But I think that that's the group I would pitch it to, but the community problem means that you're generally going to have to play this with one other person. But Final Fantasy games, like most of these games we're talking about, are games that you play by yourself. If you have one other person to play with, you can have some good games of the Final Fantasy trading card game, but you won't get to experience the fullness of the game because you won't have enough decks, you won't have enough cards, you won't really be incentivized to deck build. So I don't think the game will be at its fullest unless you have a community. So with that conceit, I'm willing to bump it below FF1 and put it above FF10 but that's like my floor.
Can I ask you one thing?
Yeah.
Have you interacted with a single person who was a Final Fantasy trading card game player?
No. Other than myself or someone who I've taught how to play, no. Or you.
Okay.
No.
How many times have you met people that think that Final Fantasy X-2 is their favorite game? Or they like Final Fantasy X-2?
Like 3 times.
3 or 4 times. Is elitism, is like the typical collectible card game elitism a problem with Final Fantasy, the trading card game?
I don't think there's enough of a community for that to know for certain if it's got a toxic community yet. There needs to be more of one for me to know. But I think that ultimately the fact that there are some more people who played 10-2, which was a large release that came out over a decade or close on a decade ago now, or more than a decade ago. I'm not going to hold it against this card game that came out like a year or 2 ago in the U.S. That people have fonder feelings for the game, for a game that is contained within this game.
You want to talk about a card game that I really like? Let's talk about Hecatomb.
Let's talk about Hecatomb. Let's decide whether this is better than Final Fantasy 1.
Getting yourself involved and invested in a card game that immediately is trashed.
Let's see. So, do
you, Gino? I guess I'm more open-minded to the idea that this is possibly more fun than Final Fantasy 1. I agree. I don't know. Because I don't think I laughed a single time when I played the trading card game, and Final Fantasy X-2 makes me laugh a lot.
You laughed a lot. We were just playing, and you decided to wipe your own board, and I was like, that seems dumb. And then you're like, I just wanted to do a thing.
And that was fun. All right, I'll give it to you. It's better than Final Fantasy X-2. So now it's just oh, that was so good. Admit it. You even laughed a little bit when I just did it. I was like,
do you realize what you're doing to yourself? And then you're like,
I was like,
nope.
Yeah, but I just want to do it because it's cool.
Yeah. There's
basically, and then you're basically screwing yourself over because I'm just going to break all these cards and
kill you.
Just kill you. It's like, I don't care. I just want to wipe the deck. I've never done this in Magic, and I've always thought it was cool. And then I did it.
Yep. And it was vowed for, and it worked. It made sense. It's the big wind. dude,
Yeah.
big windbird blows your dudes
blow
away.
everyone away, and then you're like, I'm just going to reset my cards now. And then it's like, I resign.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. There are fun combos in this game. But
Yeah,
I don't know, man. I don't know. Let
me put it to you this way. I've had an experience where I was playing my standard units deck, and I had in play Luneth from Final Fantasy III and Refia from Final Fantasy III. Refia makes all standard units 1 cheaper, and Luneth gives all standard units haste. And my deck is full of cards that are all super weak, but they just like draw a card when they come into play. And I was able to, using those two, chain Vikings. Just like play a Viking, the Viking makes me draw a card. Play another Viking, the Viking makes me draw a card. I was able to like spew 3 or 4 Vikings into play all at once and then attack with them because they all had haste. And it felt like a combo deck. And I just machine gunned my opponent to death with Vikings. And that was amazing. That was really fun.
I don't know, man. I just wish it was like a living card game. I wish this was just like...
I know you wish it was a different game, but it's not. We have to evaluate the game it is.
I wish it was. It could have been any... Is there a board game version of Final Fantasy? They should do that. It
probably is, but I haven't played it.
Do you know that there's a BioShock Infinite board game, and it's actually quite good.
I did know that. There's a Dark Souls board game and a Bloodborne board game.
I did not like the Dark Souls game, and the Bloodborne game...
We gave it away for the Community Endurance Run last year.
I played the Bloodborne game. If you ever end up playing that, we can talk about that as a podcast because I have some opinions about the Bloodborne board game. Anyways,
so is this
but there's
better
no
than
story
Final Fantasy
in the trading card. So
the story
this is
what
eventually
going
to. But again, it's really hard to recommend this game because the distribution is fucked and the community
distribution is
small. Let's talk about this because I think this is the big thing that you need to talk about is like how fucked the distribution is.
So yeah, I work part-time at a store that actually sells trading card games and stuff like that. Like we sell board games and trading card games and role-playing games, like a ton of stuff. And I was like, hey, we should try to carry this. This is a cool game. I'd love to teach it. And there is one distributor for this game in the entire United States. And if you're not ordering from them, you can't get it. And that is stupid. That is really profoundly stupid. And if you want to know why this game doesn't have more of a following, it's that. Most stores already have their distributors. They have who they buy from. And adding another one and then adding another, like, you must buy X amount. You must, spend X amount with us before we do business with you or we'll sell you certain things. Like, fuck that. Fuck the idea that one distributor can have a chokehold on your card game. It basically means that this game, you're right, like you can't – it is such that it is almost impossible to create a community from scratch because of minor issues like that. But I still think the game is more fun than Final Fantasy 1. That game, do you remember the beginning of that game when everything got paralyzed and then you just lost? And, it wasn't even that you died with dignity. It took, 10 minutes for the game to have the mercy to kill you.
Yeah. But then also, this is a trading card game with trading card game combat.
Yep.
Do you remember when the game started talking to you, thanking you for your time?
I do remember that. That was nice. Remember when you got into a random battle and then a creature used Fire 3 and then you died and never got to take an action?
I think you're highlighting reasons why we should rank Final Fantasy 1 below Final Fantasy 10 too.
No, I'm highlighting reasons why we should rank Final Fantasy 1 below the Final Fantasy trading card game. The Amarant card can throw dudes. He throws other characters. That's perfect.
Man.
That's exactly what he should do.
I have to listen to the science, don't I? I have to stop. I'm banging my head on the
Train card.
Oh, there's a Doom Train card?
Yeah.
Is there?
It's from Mobius.
Is there a Knights of the Round card? Is there a Knights of the Round card?
Knights of the Round card yet? Let me.
Is there? Is there an Ozma card?
Yes, there is an Ozma card. It's coming out in the next set. Yeah.
Oh God. Is there a
ruby
weapon? Is there a ruby weapon?
I don't think there's a ruby weapon yet. No.
Is there an emerald weapon?
I don't think there are any weapons yet. Oh, there might be. Is there Omega weapon?
Are there any? No. Is there any reference to like lightning dodging? Is that an ability in the game?
No, but there are cactuars now.
See, now that's the problem I have. It's not Final Fantasy enough. It's just using this artwork for like this pared down suite of Magic the Gathering combat.
I mean, more things are coming out all the time. There weren't monsters before, and now there are monsters.
Yeah, again. Okay. You have forced me to listen to science, Gino. You have forced me to listen to logic. I guess you are correct. Final Fantasy, the trading card game, is better than Final Fantasy 1.
Great. Excellent. All right. I think that's a show. Congratulations, Final Fantasy, the trading card game. You are the 1, 2, 3, 4. You're the 5th best Final Fantasy game. Congratulations.
This is a weird time. We have a Final Fantasy trading card game that we talked about. It's a weird time for me and in card games. I've been invested in this thing. And this is just kind of a thing. Like, I'm actually excited about the future of Magic the Gathering.
Yeah.
Because they're coming out with Heroes of Dominaria, the board game.
Dominaria looks good.
That leg looks fucking baller. I really hope that's a good game. Because that thing looks cool.
Yes. Dominaria looks like a good set. But
no, but they're making a board game version of Dominaria.
I know, and that looks good too.
And I'll play that, not the card game.
I'll play the card game. You send me the cards that come in the board game, and then we'll be fine.
No, I'm going to need to fucking...
Don't worry about it. We'll talk about it later. Okay, so thank you, ZP.
Yeah, I'm going to be here no matter what. Oh, and donate to our horrible table of minor inconveniences, annoyances.
Yep. So fundraise.pencilsofpromise.org/GBCERVIII. And you can get in touch with the show, deeplistens.libsyn.com. Hit up our comment sections, deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com, and deeplistenspod on Twitter. So thank you, ZP. Till next time, listeners. Peace!